who needs friends when you have super friends? Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, welcome to another Commander Deck Tech. In today's video, we're looking at Tomik, Wielder of Law. It is 1 white and a black for a 2/4 legendary creature human advisor. It has Affinity for planeswalkers, which means this spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each planeswalker you control. It has flying, vigilance, and whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. Tomik here is a very cool and very interesting commander. Affinity for planeswalkers is not something that you see a lot, and it's very nice to have on a commander, as importantly it also reduces command attacks if Tomik has died a bunch of times. That in itself is just going to be very strong, and will obviously mean we want to run a decent amount of planeswalkers to make the most of it. The second ability is pretty much a pillow fort ability, as it is incentivizing our opponents not to attack us. So when we combine those two, we end up with the plan for a deck. This is going to be a Super Friends deck with a pillow fort subtheme. We'll be running a bunch of planeswalkers and effects that buff up planeswalkers in order to give us an ever-growing board state of value. Our pillow fort cards, as well as Tomik, will be there to make it difficult for our opponents to attack us or our walkers. The whole end point of that is that our planeswalkers will be more likely to survive to the point where we can uptick them to get off some game-winning ultimates. A quick note on how this video will work. How we do our deck techs is that we give you all the different sections that you need to build the deck. We then give you a bunch of options in each sections and how many to run, so you can run the cards that work best for you and truly make the deck your own. Also, when it comes to planeswalkers, there won't be a dedicated section just for them, because we're going to be running planeswalkers in every section of the video. Like with most cards, we don't want to jam them in just for the sake of it. They need to do something that the deck actually wants. Any card we mentioned will be down in the description below. While you're there, please give the video a thumbs up. Let's first go over some ways in our colours to buff those planeswalkers up in loyalty, so they're harder to kill and all the quicker to their game-winning ultimates. First up we have Oath of Gideon and Gatewatch Beacon. Chad's Oath makes us some nice blockers, and then also makes each planeswalker we control enter with an additional loyalty counter. Gatewatch Beacon lets us do that part 3 times, while also being a solid mana rock as well. Next up you have Lae'zel, Vlaakith's champion. This just puts an extra counter on all of our walkers when they come in, and then importantly when we plus them as well. You then have cards like Contagion Clasp, Grateful Apparition, Staff of Completion, and Norn's Choirmaster. These all importantly have Proliferate, which again pushes our planeswalkers' loyalty up all the higher. And then very related to these, we have the Chain Veil. This Super Friends staple lets us activate our planeswalkers twice in a turn for an absolute bucket load of that lovely value. Just think of all the dumb things we can do with this card. Absolutely perfect. Next up is our Pillow Fort effects. These are here to protect not just our life total, but our planeswalkers' loyalty totals as well. First up we have effects that make our opponents have to pay to attack us or our planeswalkers. There's plenty of effects that do this, and if I'm honest, it's important to play the ones that save both us and our planeswalkers. Cards like Onakke Oathkeeper, Archon of Absolution, Baird, Steward of Argive, Archangel of Tithes, Norn's Annex and Spear of Safety are all super annoying for our opponents, which when combined with our commander should help keep us and our walkers nice and safe. You then have a card like Silent Arbiter, which makes it so that only one creature can attack or block every combat, perfect for letting our commander with its built-in cost reduction or our other creatures get in the way. You then have some other ways of persuading your opponents not to attack us, like with Oath of Kaya. It comes in as a lightning helix and then sits there and drains an opponent for 2 if they attack us or our super friends. You have slightly beefier versions of that effect with Blood Reckoning, Marchesa's Decree, and Revenge of Ravens. These deal a damage to an opponent whenever any creature has the gall to attack us or our planeswalkers. And then in a similar vein you have Liliana's Talent. This gives a walker a very strong new ultimate in stealing all cards in everyone's graveyards, but importantly destroys any creature that's dealt damage to that key planeswalker that we've enchanted it to. We then have Teo Geometric Tactician. This not only makes a war when it comes into play, it also lets us muck around with who can attack who, meaning we can make it so that only the weaker of our neighbours can attack us. Another way of incentivizing our opponents to turn their creatures somewhere else is with Brina the Demagogue. This rewards them for attacking an opponent with some lovely card draw, while also making a creature of ours all the bigger. And then lastly, we can just repeatedly make a Death Touch Snake token every turn with Ophiomancer. This is by far the most annoying blocker in the world, and it's a great way of stopping our attackers coming our way. Next up we have our card draw section, and we have a bunch of really cool options that will work with the deck. And first up, yes, finally, we have some planeswalkers. cards like Obnixila's Reignited, Tevis Sat Doom of Fools, Liliana Dreadhorde General, Sorin Grim Nemesis, Vraska's Betrayal Sting, and Kaya Intangible Slayer all have a bunch of great abilities, but the reason firstly that they're going in the deck is for the card advantage or card draw that they give us. To get those or some of our other Planeswalkers, you have cards like Arena Rector, Dejero with Eyes Open, and Ignite the Beacon. Yes, they are tutors, but they're all still great card advantage as well. We then have some cards with similar effects to our commander, with Cunning Rhetoric and Mangara the Diplomat. The Rhetoric gives us card advantage from our opponent's decks, but then Mangara the Diplomat just straight draws us cards if we ever get attacked. Then finally we have some of the courts that add the Monarchy to the game. The Monarchy works really well with the Super Friends deck because our opponents don't get it if they attack our Planeswalkers. It has to be us that they are dealing damage to. This means they have to make a choice on what they want to do. Do they want to take the Monarchy from us? Do they want to stop a Planeswalker from ultimating? And then if they do end up taking the Monarchy, it just means we can let them fight amongst themselves while our Planeswalkers tick up ever higher. Honestly, I think these are just going to be really good in the deck. Next up we have our ramp section, and as our Planeswalkers tend to be a little pricey, we're going to want a little bit more than a regular deck. First up we have some effects that let us go and get lands out of the deck and put them into play. You have unconditional ones like Wayfarer's Bauble and Solemn Simulacrum, and then you have ones that require opponents to have more lands than us to work. Scholar of New Horizons is great and repeatable in this deck as it will work with Planeswalkers, and then Knight of the White Orchid and Keeper of the Accord are just going to be really solid as well. We then have Lothlo Corrupt Sheriff, a really annoying little halfling that'll easily make us a couple of extra treasure every turn cycle. And then yes, we have a large range of mana rocks as well. Being honest, these will make up the largest portion of our ramp. You have staples like Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Orzhov Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Felwar Stone. They're all fantastic options, run them, they are just great. We have a couple of 3-mana rocks that synergize with the deck next, firstly with Glistening Sphere. Yes, it is a little bit slow, but it does proliferate when it comes in, which could just be really helpful for us. Then Honorworn Shaku is a really cool one, as Planeswalkers are importantly legendary permanents, and yes, that means we can tap them to untap this. With all the Planeswalkers we will be running in the deck, this could generate us multiple bits of mana in a turn. Next up is our interaction section, and this will be a fair bit bigger than a regular deck because we have so many good options that work with what we're trying to do. Firstly, we obviously have some Planeswalkers. Walkers like Gideon Jura and Kaya the Inexorable can answer an annoying creature, and then you have Elspeth Sun's Champion and the Eternal Wanderer, which can repeatedly wrath the board, meaning our Planeswalkers are less likely to be attacked. We then have a fine edict effect with Oath of Liliana, which importantly can repeatedly make us some tokens. And then in these colours we have a bunch of the best instant speed interaction out there. You either want them to be cheap and efficient like Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares, or they can be a bit more mana to cast, but they hit a wider range of threats with things like Anguished Unmaking and Generous Gift. And then we have a absolute bucket load of board wipes. There are so many that you can run in these colours, and being honest, they might just be some of the best cards in the deck. They won't be the most fun for our opponents, but why these are busted is that our game plan is to put our mana into our Planeswalkers. Our opponents are putting their mana into their creatures. These negate all the work that our opponents are doing while helping to protect our repeatable value engines. The fact that our commander also has built-in cost reduction so we can get around command attacks means we don't care if it dies a lot. Board wipes also work really well with the Monarch cards that we mentioned earlier, because it's very hard for our opponents to become the Monarch when they have no creatures. It is definitely mean, but I think the optimal version of this deck has at least 8 to 10 board wipes in it. Next up we have some protection. These are just solid ways of keeping our commander and our walkers around that little bit longer. First up we have Elspeth's Knight Errant. The plus is great at gumming up the board, but that ultimate of making most of our board indestructible is super busted, and then makes any of our other board wipes completely one-sided. Next you have Gideon of the Trials, which has the weird zero ability of as long as we control a Gideon Planeswalker, we can't lose the game. Not being able to lose the game is definitely a form of protection. Next we have Semester's End. This is effectively a fog for our Planeswalkers, as we can blink them if they're ever about to die. And then the fact they'll come back into play with 1 plus their starting loyalty means that if we have this in hand, we can be down-ticking as well to get value beforehand. You then have Brought Back. 2 mana to just return 2 of our Planeswalkers that have just died straight back into play. What's nice is that this works if we've down-ticked them or ultimated them as well. Okay, we've gone through the bulk of the deck, let's go over some dedicated ways that the deck is going to win the game. First up we have some Planeswalkers that make a bunch of tokens. There are so many that do this in these colours while also doing other things. You have cards like Ajani Caller of the Pride, Elspeth Sun's Nemesis, Elspeth Tyrell, and Lolth Spider Queen, to name just a few. The fact that these creature makers are on Planeswalkers means that it doesn't matter if we're wrathing the board a bunch, we will always have a board state ready to attack again and again. On top of those we have some Planeswalkers or Planeswalker Matter cards that can buff up those tokens, with things like Kaya Geist Hunter, Sorin Lord of Innistrad, Elspeth's Talent, and Gideon, ally of Zendikar. The ones that make emblems especially are really good, as there's nothing our opponents can do about them once we have them in play. You then have a card like Sorin Markov, which can just set a player's life total to 10, ready for our board to then take them out. You then have cards like the Peregrine Dynamo and the final chapter of Urza Assembles the Titans. These are just more cool and good ways of multiplying the number of times we get effects from our planeswalkers in a turn. We then have cards like Ascend from Avernus and Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. These are great late game bombs that can bring back all the planeswalkers from our bin straight into play, perfect for ending any long grindy game of Commander. There are a bunch more planeswalkers that we haven't mentioned in this video. Some of them we haven't mentioned because they're really expensive. If they do one of the things that the deck needs, like draw us cards or answer threats or win us the game, then you can run them as well. As long as they fit into one of the sections, you will be golden. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, and as we're only 2 colours, we have some solid options that we can run. First up, we have some cards that care about planeswalkers, with Khan's Bastion just being some bonus proliferate, and then Interplanar Beacon being some solid incidental life gain and also fixing. We then have cards like Maze of Ith and Core Haven, which are a great way of stopping a key attacker dealing damage in a turn. And then you have a cool card like Nesting Grounds, which is just a cool way of moving around those loyalty counters to a walker that needs it more. Right, that's going to do it for the video. If you're new or if you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. The more people who are subscribed, the cooler stuff we can do, the better content we can bring to you all, and it would greatly help me out. But until next time, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.